What's up, everyone? It's the Autistic Scyther here, and this is part 2 of my top 10 favorite Fire Emblem Fates Birthright characters. For those that already know, part 1 is up on my channel at the moment, so if you want to see numbers 10 through 6, I suggest you watch that video first, then come back for the remaining 5 entries. That being said, without further ado, for Hoshidan! And let's get back into it. Moving on next, at number 5, we have Takumi. Yeah, for those that already don't know, I love archers. And this is surprisingly enough the first member of the Hoshidan royal family that's on this list. Granted, I already put Takumi on my list of top 10 archers in video games, so honestly, I don't want to repeat all that I said about him that I had already said about him from that video. So, if you want to hear about what I think of him as an archer, well, you gotta at least take a look at that video to find that out. But that being said, to prevent myself from repeating, all that I said in that video can be mentioned here. But that being said, even with that, like Saizo, Takumi is one of the few, dare I say, individuals in Hoshido that are more or less suspicious of Korin when they inexplicably return to Hoshido. And honestly, it really does say a lot. Naturally, for those that already don't know, this is naturally due to the fact that he more or less sees himself as being somewhere in the middle. Not only due to living up to everyone's expectations, especially since he's one of the heirs to the throne of Hoshido, especially considering Ryoma and Hinoka are the older of the two, are the older of the group. That being said, either way, it could essentially lead him down some very interesting pathways, whether being used by Iago as a pawn to more or less just betray the group when they try to take on Garen and Nor, or basically being seen as an eventual final boss in Fire Emblem Fates Conquest due to Nankos taking him over. And either way, he does show a bit of, dare I say, suspicion to both Korin and Azura. However, that being said, there are parts to him that basically kind of show his more softer side, as seen in his supports with Azura, where he's more or less able to help Azura with a child who has somehow gotten lost, and more often than not, even is able to easily bond with him as well. And it's not just that; there's also his support with. In terms of his supports with Sakura, it basically shows that he has a hard time figuring out ways to more or less deal with fancy get-togethers or fancy banquets, to the point where they try to find ways of kind of escaping said banquet, only to realize that it's not all that bad. And surprisingly enough, kind of fun to say the least, since especially when you consider his support with Leo, where they more or less realize that they basically have something in common, which is kind of funny to say the least, especially considering they're called the twins. Yeah, says a lot. Really does say a lot. Moving on next, at number 4, we have Oboro. Oh boy. Speaking of Takumi, yeah, you kinda knew that I would mention about one of his retainers. And while Hinata is basically just an idiot, Oboro is more or less a little more memorable and one of my more favorite units. Which, again, that being said, I'm actually surprised that the soldier or halberdier class has not been used all that much by intelligence systems. I mean, seriously, they did so well with the likes of Nephany and Lucas, and heck, they even brought back the halberdier class with Tamara. And I think it's a Boro that basically he helps out, since she's basically a solid fighter no matter what. And especially with all that. All her skill with a spear. That being said, the main thing most people will talk about when they think about Oboro is her hatred towards Norians. To the point that whenever she's basically around the Norian, she'll make an almost demonic looking face. This is naturally due to the fact that when she was younger, her parents ended up getting killed by Norians, or at least Norian assassins. And more often than not, as a result, she's been bearing a grudge that whole time. And naturally, due to the fact that her parents were essentially tailors in service of the Hoshidan royal family, and the fact that she's wanted to become a tailor or get into fashion because of her parents, it makes her that much more interesting. Especially in terms of revelation when she, in her support with Baruka, where we discover that was Baruka's master who basically killed Oboro's parents. And while it looks like Oboro is wanting to get revenge on Baruka, especially after realizing that it was Baruka that killed her master, she realized, no, that's not right. I can't kill you because that would perpetuate the cycle of violence. Honestly, it's kind of one of the most, surprisingly enough, I never thought a Fire Emblem character would make me think about the cycle of hatred and violence. But, wow, really does blow my mind. Also, it doesn't hurt that most modern AU fanfictions has her as either a fashion designer or a fashion student. So, yeah. Moving on next, at number 3, we have Hana. Yeah. Considering that almost there are a lot of people in the Countdown community who have their fair amount of crushes. The Green Scorpion has Lynn, Blazing Knight has Sumiya, Josh Scorcher has Mifa, surprisingly enough. Granted, it's fair to say that if I had to consider my video game crush, it has to be Hana, which, again, really does say a lot. However, that being said, even with that, surprisingly enough, if you haven't realized from video game sword wielders, I have basically I've taken a notice that I've gotten a lot of respect for a lot of sword masters, as proven considering that Felix is also on that list. But that really says a lot once you realize how solid a character Hana is, due to not only being Sakura's retainer, but her best friend as well. Naturally, and basically the reason why she's so diligent in her duties as a retainer is naturally because of the fact that her father used to fight in service of King Sumeragi as well. Which, honestly, the fact that she's living to his legacy really says a lot. So, hence why more often than not she spends her time training. That being, and even sparring. But that being said, almost every training obsessed or sparring obsessed swordmaster has a bit of a soft spot. Again, Felix does have his love of cats and sweets, and Long Q has his fear of women. Hana, on the other hand, is in touch with her more feminine side, as more often than not, she basically is still willing to more or less just go gaga over things that she finds cute. Again, case in point in her supports with Hayato, as she's able to get a lot of things that were given to him by the people of his village because he thinks of them as childish because she finds them cute, and she's the only one who's able to stand Laszlo and his flirtatious ways due to him offering her lipstick. And yeah, she actually likes it. Just read the support with Laszlo, you'll soon see what I'm talking about. But yeah, honestly, kind of makes her one of my favorites, and puts her at the bronze medal here. So yeah. Moving on next at number 2, we have Ryoma. Yep, surprise, surprise, the oldest member of the Hoshidan royal family is on this list. However, he's not number 1 because, I mean, honestly, there's another one ahead of him. But, in all fairness, I tend to notice a lot of things, and Ryoma is a solid individual. I mean, granted, that being said, when it comes down to it, both older member of each royal family, I kind of enjoy. But even with that, they still prove to be pretty strong. And that definitely says a lot, as not only is Ryoma stoic, but he's able to understand his family quite well, and help them out even whenever with their problems, no matter what. And he's able to think on his feet as well. Plus, his support with Elise, while being adorable, is really interesting, as he's able to help her out, help her get her kite down from a tree, which is proof that is proof of his kindness. Plus, Astra plus Vantage plus Raijinto is broken. I've said before, and I've said so many times. Alright. That being said, this leaves us with number 1. And the number 1 entry is Sakura. Honestly, as it's noted, I am a sucker for cute things. And honestly, it's kind of fair to say that Sakura is basically just adorable. I mean, while she is the youngest member of the Hoshidan royal family, she's caring, she's kind, and she's willing to basically willing to trust anyone no matter what. Basically willing to see the good in everyone. I mean, heck, in Revelations, she's easily able to befriend Elise. Which really says a lot, even though Elise has to take the first step. However, that being said, she is willing to stand up for what she believes in, as seen with her support with Azama when she's able to snap his staff in 2. Yeah, that's pretty impressive. Plus, She uses a bow in her priestess class, and if you already hadn't guessed, any class that uses a bow is my favorite in my book. That's all I gotta say. Those are my top 10 favorite Fire Emblem Fates Birthright characters. Like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you next time.